and the timekeepers are really strict with time. So I will try as early as possible, say 30 minutes into the conversation, to open up for inputs, questions, and provocations from the audience. So I'm kind of priming you to start thinking about questions rather early instead of us squeezing them in the last 15 minutes of the hour. I will not read bios. These are available on the DFM website. We've also agreed with the panelists that we're not going to do that. By the time I get to the third speaker, you've forgotten the bio of the first one, right? But yes, I will read name, surname, as well as the organization that they represent and their capacity. So let's do this formal stuff. So to my left, immediate left, is Tendayi Nyeke from Tenye Creates. To the left of Tendayi is Lerato Mogoatlhe from Africa No Filter, followed by Mercy Wanjiku from DocuBox. And at the far left, I got this wrong. Sorry. Yes. At the far left is Funmbi Ogunbanwo. See what I did there? So yes, kind of this is a panelist, and these are the people that I'm holding the conversation with. I will start with the housekeeping notes and then get into the description of the conversation. So I have to do an official welcome to the 16th edition of the Durban Film Arts. We ask all members of the audience, as well as the panelists, to kindly put your cell phones on silent or airplane mode. I want to acknowledge the DFM's respect policy, and it can be phrased as such. We want to bring to your attention the Durban Film Arts respect policy, which should come up on the screen now, but maybe it won't. But you would have seen this when you registered. Kindly tag the Durban Film Arts when posting on social media. DFM can be found on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok, etc. Please use the tag DFM 2025. The session is recorded in video and audio, and it will live on the DFM's website and be used for DFM's marketing purposes. French language interpretation is available for those who wish to use it, and there's a QR code at the door to enable this. And I've been asked to observe time. So, I now get into the description. Africa No Filter knows that narrative matters, and to this point, prevailing narratives have turned a dynamic, innovative, and evolving continent with 54 countries into a single story of broken and dependent continents, a people who lack agency. Given this exhausted and dated notion, Africa No Filter is on a mission to shift outdated perceptions of Africa by supporting the development of stories that represent Africa beyond the stereotypes and tropes. In other words, Africa No Filter is supporting the kinds of stories made by the people in this room. This panel, as I mentioned, is in partnership with Africa No Filter. It's born out of an insight from their report titled African Youth and the Impacts of Narrative, which was published in 2020, where young people expressed the impacts of film and television on their perceptions of identity, discontents, and socio-political grievances. The people on this panel are just as invested in the circulation, in the making, and the economics of this rebalancing act. Assembled on stage is a constellation of voices who speak to this exercise of reimagining. So key to this discussion, I'm kind of leading into the first question now, key to this discussion is how different players such as broadcasters, distributors, commissioning editors, producers, etc., are in the world of television and cinema are reimagining. What are the critical tools necessary for this exercise? And so when I say tools, I'm talking here about infrastructure for world building, for example. I'm referring to aesthetic tools, ideas, themes, concepts, etc., as well as the commercial tools, the difficult economics of putting ideas out into the world. Lastly, we'll also get to hear about the Last Mile Film Fund, as well as the Africa Narrative Change Film Award. And so kind of with that as a framing, I'll maybe start with you, Lerato, quite fittingly, to maybe kind of pick up on this point that I've just mentioned and kind of talk a bit more about kind of what is the impetus for this panel from Africa No Filter. And I think we have a video that will kind of provide this context as well.
Yes, I think let's start with the video first. It'll take the words right out of my mouth. Perfect. Thank you so much. So essentially, that's exactly what we do. You know, the story of Africa, we all know, is so rich. We are such a diverse continent, but including in film, the story often gets reduced to stereotypes, right? But these stereotypes are not inconsequential. They impact investments flow to the continent. They impact how Africans see themselves and how the world sees us. And so we decided, the people who founded us 5 years ago, Ford Foundation, Melon Foundation, and the like, decided that there really needed to be an organization that exists solely to challenge these narratives. And we do them in various ways. Firstly, we do research. It gives us evidence, like you saw here. We did a report. It showed that film is one of the biggest influencers for young Africans. They watch local African movies as much as they watch American movies. That is not the case for literature. Also not the case for African music, but for African film it is. But however, the narrative they got from film, they get from most films they watch, still perpetuates those narratives. So then we thought as Africa No Filter, let's engage with film as a conversation with the industry. Let's find out what filmmakers are doing, what stories they're telling, but most importantly, how we can all come together to ensure that we are a movement of storytellers and people who enable storytelling that ultimately shifts stereotypical narratives.
So that's beautiful, and I think the point, perhaps, is to see how the rest of the panelists who are engaged in the circulation, in the making, as well as supporting creatives who are kind of casting these new ideas on the continent, how they think about this question of reimagining and the difficulties of this. And so, Mercy, if I may start with you, perhaps, as program manager at DocuBox, what do you find, oh my, I lost my question now. What do you find to be missing in this process of reimagining? So like, do you think there are maybe certain aspects that you are feeling can bring a fuller picture, can be the critical piece to how we're thinking about this kind of, the scope of thinking about ourselves, for example? I mean, you are working with content, essentially, and so I'm kind of curious to see if you are maybe like seeing that there's a kind of saturation or an overproduction of a particular narrative as affirming and positive as it may be, but it does start to reproduce some of this kind of a single narrative, you know.
I think, first of all, before I say what's missing, it's important for us to acknowledge that there's already so much happening in the ecosystem. We can already see a big shift in how the industry is moving, and I think that's something to appreciate. But going into what's missing, one of the things that we've realized as DocuBox is that a lot of filmmakers focus on making films for the external market rather than for the African market. And so as DocuBox, one of the initiatives that we do is to empower filmmakers to make stories that are relatable even to the African market. And also to tell stories that are relatable. I think one of the things you notice around the ecosystem, and especially in filmmaking, is stories around poverty or resource plundering or such like negative things. But we feel like as Africans, we have so much more that we can tell, and we have so many other thematic areas that we can cover when we are telling our stories. I could give a good example of, we had a program at DocuBox called Kenya Creates, which was a collection of 4 short films that were done by people who were literally not filmmakers, but we invited them, took them through story labs to help them come up with a script, and they did stories around body autonomy. As most of you would know, in most African countries, it's often limited to talk about things like body positivity, to talk about accepting yourself. And so we brought a poet, we brought a comedian, and we brought different storytellers who were able to come up with films that are changing how people view their own bodies and how people tell stories about their bodies. And what was interesting as part of that project is that they told the stories from their own perspective, because for DocuBox, we believe that every person holds a story about Africa that is beyond what we are used to as the norm, beyond corruption, beyond power, beyond all that. We are also very keen to focus on storytellers who are doing other things like climate storytelling, people who are doing things like civic engagement. For those who know as Kenyans, I think civic engagement is one of the things that's really affecting us. And so as an organization, we've done several initiatives and several films that have brought together stories that then help people to have conversations around civic engagement, around how we perceive ourselves as Africans, how we go about our governance. So I think rather than say what's missing, there's already traction, but then again, there's already so much that we can do. Something else I can highlight as something we can do is looking at infrastructure. Yes, the story labs exist, but they're here and there. They're not accessible to every storyteller who'd want to be part of a story lab that helps them to tell an authentic story. So we'd like to see more story labs that come up. We'd like to see funding that doesn't limit us in the stories we tell, because sometimes we all know the person who pays the piper calls the tune, yeah? So we'd love to see stories that are not limited, stories that are beyond what people are used to seeing as the norm. And as DocuBox, we're very keen to highlight such stories.
So, Funmbi, I have to read this because I've jotted this, and I'm going to mess it up if I kind of speak from the top of the head. So I'd like for you to take us into the details of your project titled My Father's Shadow, which is described as a groundbreaking project, which was made possible through a first-of-its-kind international co-production and a financing partnership between Elements Pictures in the UK, BBC Film, the BFI, and Mubi. And I think it kind of this example demonstrates the kinds of players that would need to assemble around a table in order for these stories to travel successfully, and I think show us as well the pull of these stories amongst the sophisticated network of players that you've assembled. So if you're comfortable, can you kind of talk about how you're able to pull these players around this narrative, and what became the interest for these people to come together? Also can talk about the difficulties they're in.
It's a very loaded question.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no. First of all, we're all safe here, right? Yeah? Okay. I think one of the beautiful things that happens when we all come together and like we gather as like different people from different parts of Africa is that we can be truthful, right? And we can be honest about our experiences. I think the very first thing I want to maybe touch on is actually the theme of this, which is like film as a tool for reimagining, and then I will segue into your question. When I think of reimagining, for me, it's not so much about changing what you see, but changing how you see it. In the sense that you can, like, there is a very unique experience that you have when you live on the continent or when you're from the continent and you've moved somewhere else. And you take your culture, you take your community, you take your language, your food, your people with you. And I think how you depict what it is that you're experiencing via film is really where the power is. So sometimes it's not necessarily going so big into themes, heavy themes like poverty or corruption, but it's changing how you are talking about it, how you are sharing your voice about it. And I think that ultimately is where the shift comes in. So to talk about like our film, My Father's Shadow, it became Nigeria's first official selection at Cannes. And with that, like, the backdrop of the film is an election crisis that happened in our country in 1993, where it was the first time we had a democratic election, but then it was suddenly annulled, and then we had military rule come into power. But the lens through which the film is told is a family story about a father and two boys. And it's a father who is trying to make ends meet, get his pay for his work, which we can all relate with, but also care for his boys. And the first time he really gets to spend a full day with them, and they get to spend a full day with him, and the journey that they go on from father to son, son to father, but also as the country is emerging in being a father as well, right? And you have this like big, or rather singular perspective of like family, but the backdrop is political. So I think when we speak about like reimagining, for me, it really sort of is distilled into the how we are talking about what we are talking about, as opposed to what we are talking about alone. Because you can't change certain things. I can't change the fact that there's a hideous amount of traffic in Lagos that will never go away. I can't change the fact that the government has done and we have the history that we have. But I can tell you, I can change how I see it. And I can tell you how it should, not necessarily should be seen, but I can tell you my perspective and my truth. And I hope that in sharing that, it gives a positive resonance with how you are relating with the everyday mundane things and the world that is around you. Because ultimately, that's what stories do, right? They change the way we see and we relate with the world that is around us. I think with this project, yes, we were financed by the BBC and the BFI and MUBI, and it's incredible to have partners who were able to see such a culturally specific story, because the entire film was shot in Lagos and Ibadan. Majority of the crew come from Nigeria and different parts of Africa. We have crew from South Africa. We have crew from Kenya. And that's my biggest and proudest thing, that over 90% of the crew is actually from here. It's such a big feat for me because it means that it was so important producing it to have that kind of structure, because I wanted to be able to make the film again. And if I'm going to make the film again, I want to be able to call my brothers in Ghana, call my brothers in Kenya, call my brothers in South Africa, and say, hi, can we come together and make a film? I don't necessarily want to have to rely on bringing people from outside. And so, although we were, again, financed by these institutions, and it is a very unique sort of position, I think where we are and where I am specifically with our company, Fatherland, is steering the conversation more towards how we get African financing from development stage in projects like this. Because it's not enough to say, oh, I want to redefine the narrative, I want to reimagine, but I'm not reimagining the structure that is behind making the narrative, right? So the bigger thing is actually more how we have more, as she's mentioned as well, more funds that are not limited and confining from Africa, to take a look at projects like this and invest in talent. What happened with our project was we had shot a short film in 2020 before COVID hit called Lizard. And that film was shot entirely in Lagos as well. And it went on to win a Sundance Award and get nominated for the BAFTA. But the film was commissioned by the BBC. And the money that they gave was not a lot of money. But with that investment, that sort of seed investment in the director and the writer, who are both my business partners, it became a relationship that was nurtured from that time, from a short. So it was almost a no-brainer for them to say, oh, we would want to work with you again, because they just took a bet on us, believed in the project, funded it, and then, it became bigger. And we, obviously, being, in the position that we were in with Lizard at the time, were also in a similar position with My Father's Shadow. And so it was easier to bring in other players. And the BFI and our major executive, Ama Ampadu, who's Ghanaian, she played an instrumental role in helping us develop the project, but also securing the funds as well from the BFI. And so I think for me, it's a great and unique position, but I want to see more African financing in that mix from the beginning. I want to see more bets taken with African talents that are at home and that are in the diaspora. Akinola Davis, who's the director, he's based in the UK, but majority of his film and narrative projects are intentionally shot back home in Nigeria. Because one, that's where he's from, but two, it's become a big statement for him that films that are made at home can travel. And so it's become an intentional point to make sure that anything that he's making, narrative-wise, is shot back home. But there's also the macroeconomics of it. How by bringing a project that is of a certain scale, you're developing the skill set that exists back home. You know, so, I mean, I don't know if I've answered the question.
No, I think you have.
Okay, cool. But yeah, that's it.
It's very elegant, thank you. Tendayi, you make your own work, you also support creatives, build worlds, yeah. And so I'm curious to hear how you think about this question of reimagining material from the continent and the stories therein.
1, 2, mic check. What's up, y'all?
Your mic sounds nice. 1, 2.
So firstly, I just want to sit here and listen to all of you. I'm just like, ooh, taking notes in my head. So most of my career has been supporting other creatives on purpose. Just a really short snapshot, I was on the African, thing of like secure job thing, but had a genuine interest in medicine, and then I saw blood, and I was like, that's not going to work. And then I found my storytelling voice just as, I think it just burst out of me. Like, I think I was 17. I've done speech and drama my whole life. And we were doing yet another Shakespearean play in high school, and I just went to my drama teacher, we're in Zimbabwe. Why do we keep doing Shakespeare? Where's Chinua Achebe? Where's all of this? Where's Zakes Mda? Where's all of... And then she goes, well, if you think you're that cute, you write a play, and if it's any good, we'll do it. And I was like, fine. And I did, and my play, I love your point. For me, literally, that was gonna be my point. It's actually how you see. It's not about what is, but it's like how you see. And so my play was, I was obsessed with Pocahontas at the time, so I loved this epic love story thing, but this girl who was, I love fantasy as a genre, and also how you see genre too, right, in the film lens. So I love fantasy adventure, I love science fiction, I love stuff that's framed within a perspective. And then I was just, like I said, obsessed with Pocahontas, so I told this epic love story with the backdrop of colonialism. This is me, 17, what do I know about any of this stuff? And we put on, and she said, at the time, we were just learning computers. I'm not as old as I look. We're learning computers. And my friend did the typing for me. And I wrote this play, I turned it in, and she goes, oh, this is not bad. And that was my first time producing anything, not even knowing that producing was a job or what that was. We put this play on. My whole school is in tears. They're like, oh, we're going to tour this play around Harare. And we played it at St. George's from Zimbabwe. And we toured, and this thing was a full house because in school, we were not doing African plays. And kids were not encouraged to write. And so from my perspective, based on what I loved, which was stuff from other places, but I was connecting with the way they were telling the story, not so much the specifics. And then I found a way to integrate my own identity and curiosity in my own way through theater. And I was like, I want to keep doing this. I want to find a way to create frameworks for other artistic people to do the same thing. And then I studied film, and I went to Australia to study film because I was obsessed with Baz Luhrmann and the way he was making movies, which was like hyper-saturated, big worlds, or creating scale even within contained environments. Moulin Rouge, if you've seen it, is my favorite movie of all time. Nicole. So I was just obsessed with the way Australians were telling story and seeing the world. Taika Waititi's from New Zealand. But again, the way he told the Thor, Marvel, it was weird. Have you guys seen Love and Thunder? The last Thor movie where Natalie Portman becomes a Thor? Have you seen that? It's out of the mind of a madman, right? It's like, who does that to a Marvel thing? And so I was obsessed with that. And so I don't come from a rich family. It was a mad hustle. It was a lot. But I wanted to learn from these people, and I wanted to come back and bring that here and experiment with that. And so from then on, I learned it was called producing, what I was actually doing, creating ecosystems, finding resources, pushing artists to find the best version of executing their story and being a sounding board and going, how about this? And there's this phrase, creative friction, and being creative friction and going, is that the entry point, or can we think about other ways to do this? And so I freelanced forever, and then eventually found myself at the SABC as a commissioning editor, but I was working in unscripted content and reality shows, and reality shows are a way to see the world, right? And did very genre-y stuff and late night TV stuff and more talk stuff. But again, there's some SABC people in here, right? You guys really set a strong foundation for storytelling. I have so much love for public broadcasters because they create spaces for people that are in their countries of origin to find their own storytelling voice. And then as macroeconomics dictate, new players come in, and then we're more resourced, and then we leave them, and we've got so many problems to solve, but it is a 360, right? So and I want to just get to this point. So now I actually work in animation. I actually do both. At some point, I was like, I have something to say. I have a perspective on a particular subject matter, and I want to tell it. So I founded my own company, Tendayi Nyeke. But I've worked in public broadcasting. I've worked as an independent filmmaker. I've worked for streamers. I currently live in the US, and I'm developing an African-based project. And I'm maybe one of 3 Black people in a building of 1,000 people. And I find that I'm the only person that knows. I think I'm actually one of 2 Africans, and the other guy is a tech guy. So when we're working on my thing, everybody's like, would they do this? What's the hair like? I'm like, I can only speak again from my own individual perspective. So with this reimagining piece, it's like including other people as well. So I don't have the monopoly on what a Zimbabwean girl looks like. Let's talk to 20 Zimbabwean girls and have a conversation, and so on. So for me, it's about building a community that supports, in lieu of resources to develop, let's support each other and create a replica of a model of a studio that's supporting you. So it's a group of friends. Triggerfish Animation Studios that I worked for 3 years had a director's lab. So it was like, we're gonna have 20 directors or 15 directors. Do you guys still have it? Where's Funmbi? I don't know if you still have it. But every fortnight, a director can put their hand up and go, hey, I have something I wanna practice. I wanna soundboard something off you. And 12 other voices offer an hour of their time. And they become creative friction, and they become a sounding board to play and experiment. So in lieu of $1 million landing on our laps, let's be community for each other and help each other find interesting ways to tell stories. And I want to say one more thing, a beautiful thing about, again, this perspective, something I've learned in the last 6 years of working in animation. Are there any artists here, people that draw, illustrate, musicians even? Are there any? I think we can learn from you, because what artists do is they take a glass and they go, okay, what does this look like if I put the light over here? Well, how do I draw this if I hold the pencil loosely, if I hold it tightly? And so you get 20 different versions of the same glass. And I think we can borrow that thinking and going, what are the 20 different ways I can tell the story? And then what's the coolest way to tell the story with the resources I have? And I'm done speaking, thank you.
No. We have 45 minutes, so you are nowhere close to done. I do have 2 questions which I'm kind of thinking to hold and just get a gauge from the audience if there are any burning questions that people want to offer. So there's one at the front, 2. All right, great. All right, we can do this. So I maybe want to position a question to you, Mercy. I think while the continent is diverse, there still exist these blocks in which we think of the continents: East Africa, Southern Africa, etc., etc. I wonder if, through the work that you've seen, we have reached, or what may be the ways that we can start to balance the narratives. I think due to infrastructural, economical, and in cases political circumstances, certain countries or certain region become the loudest voice, and they begin to represent and eclipse other narratives that are equally important in order for us to have this nuance about the continent. Is there maybe something that you can offer? Is there something you can respond to there? Kind of like thinking about balancing the narratives that come out of the continent, so that they are not these dominant narratives that kind of reproduce once again what the continent is, when it's actually just one region.
I think it's possible to achieve balance, but I don't know what that balance would look like, because depending from different contexts and different experiences and how people have experienced life, and as she said, the artists see the glass in different dynamics and different versions. And so for us, we don't really like to put people in boxes into the kind of stories that they'd like to tell. And we usually invite someone to tell their story, and then us, we help with polishing the script and getting you to go through the whole process of getting the final product ready. So rather than put people in thematic areas and force people to create stories within thematic boxes, we encourage any story that you think is worth telling, and then whatever gaps we see within your story are the kind of things that we're going to help you with. So some people will come and they'll be needing maybe post-production support. And we'll find ways, and through different collaborations, we'll find ways of helping you go through your post-production. Just recently, we had a post-production lab in Nairobi for the people who've been doing their work and they seem somehow stuck. And then from there, we try through our networks to find them someone who can fund so they're able to complete. We help them in terms of audience building. One of the things that we've seen that has really been working is also through screenings and doing community engagements, you get feedback from audiences, like live feedback. So that way, you're able to iterate your work. You're able to get live and actionable feedback from people. You'll ask them, what did you like about the film? They'll tell you something like, I like how the story was told. I'll give an example of, we screened a film to a high school in Kenya where the teacher, it was a boys' school, and the film was about girls and body positivity. But one of the teachers talked about, I don't have a daughter. He said, I don't have a daughter, but I'm not teaching a girls' school, but through your film, I've been able to know how to teach my daughter to be more aware of the body issues that she's going through and stuff like that. Or you'll screen something around governance in Kenya, and someone will tell you, we're so used to seeing the bloody side of the governance issues in Kenya, but you guys have brought to us a different angle to governance. So we don't really box creatives because we feel like culture is fluid, things change a lot, and so rather than put people in silos and tell them, take this path and force you through this path, we'll take your story as it is because we believe that's the true reflection of the Africans. That's your lived experience, and the best way to achieve balance is by letting people to have the autonomy to tell that story as it is. And then from there, you can support in other ways, whether it's funding, whether it's networks, whether it's capacity building. So that's our preference, rather than stipulate what type of story we want to see from you. We'd rather give you the support that you need to be able to tell your story as authentic as possible.
Got you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You've been taking notes, Lerato.
Yes, actually, because there are many ways, there's so much that we do together, you know, even the shared perspectives. One of the things that you always say about the storytelling that you're advocating for is that we just want African stories to be told better. So with nuance, with context, and we want stories, and we also want better stories that are diverse. You know, let's have African horror stories, and we have indeed funded one. Let's have comedies, let's have playfulness as well. It doesn't need to always be if in the South African context, it doesn't need to be Tsotsi or Yesterday or that movie escaped me now, for it to be big and meaningful, right? An African film doesn't have to be in just those categories for them to thrive. But most importantly, African storytellers should not feel that they have to keep telling stories that they think will get them the attention, or most importantly, because I represent a fund-making organization, the stories that you think you'll get funding from. One of the consistent feedback that we get as an organization from the storytellers we've partnered with is that we do not dictate what you must do. And we are not looking for projects that are around thematic areas unless it's an active partnership with an organization. Because we know that it's very important for storytellers to imagine their own worlds and their own storying, right? But what we want to see as a tangible thing is, did this give us new heroes and new characters?
Nice.
Did this help us reimagine a city like Lagos? You know, Lagos, for example, everyone knows it has massive traffic, but so does New York, so does LA, so does Tokyo. But that's not the story of those cities, right? Even when you see the traffic, it's not seen as this, oh my goodness, there goes the city's massive traffic. Again, there's a point and intention to it. So I think that's essentially I know that's essentially what we are about and what we're advocating for. But as an individual also, I think it's very important for us as storytellers, which I also am in another capacity, to also be mindful that words and storytelling is not without consequence. There is also storytelling that we inherit, you know, and you need to engage with those ones. So I trained as a journalist. The first thing you're told in journalism school is if it leads, it bleeds, right? And then if you do not stop and start questioning your training, then the stereotypes are perpetuated, you know. there's more than one way to write about gender and write about African women, but there's also certain stereotypes that have been perpetuated over time and time again, that then they become almost something that you don't stop and think about. Why is it that when I'm writing an African woman, I'm imagining her to be either A, B, C, D, E, you know? So it's very important to just always bear with that in mind. And one last thing. Everything that I say about A&F, that we say are interventions, is that we do not just ask the questions ourselves, we engage with the community, and then we go develop funding programs that are a response to that.
So we'll shift over to the audience. We'll take the first question, and I'm thinking we take 3 questions. And then I could ask you to kindly direct your question to a panelist, kindly, as you ask the questions. So we have a hand here at the front, and we've got one at the back, and another one to the other side. Okay, and more.
Hi everyone, my name is Hlongwane. I'm a writer and producer from South Africa. So recently I had an experience where we were working on like a period piece, which is like a war epic, and we had to like scan some of the background actors to be used for CGI, and they actually refused because in like Zulu culture there's this concept of uktwebula, which is to capture someone's image, is to take their soul. And then we ended up having to be in a situation where we like performed the ritual and the cleansing after the whole process was done. So I'm interested in your thoughts about sort of how we can Africanize or make the filmmaking process itself more African and ethical, even as we're making these stories that are supposed to reimagine Africa. Just it's for the whole panel.
I have an anecdote. Yeah.
Can we take the other 2? And then we'll come to the anecdotes. So please don't lose anecdotes. I mean, this conversation is getting really warm. So this is great.
I don't have a question, Ashley. My name is Andrea Gomes. I'm from Angola, Luanda. So first, my English is no good, so I will try. I have a project. The name is Cinéfilos em Literatos. So we screen a movie adapted from books, national and international books. After that, we have a little critical conversation around the books and the movie. For me, I think the most important thing is like see film in the movie has told for reimagining Africa. Because in Angola, we, the young filmmaker, don't read fiction novel about the writing from continent. They read maybe Shakespeare, maybe Mila Kundera, other writer from other country. If they read writer from South Africa, from Nigeria, like in early age, maybe one day when they become a filmmaker, one day I read something about Lagos. Imagine that. When I become a filmmaker, maybe I can do some movie about that. I don't know how the people every time say, the people don't do movie about the Africa, but they don't read things about the Africa. Even in Angola, there is many people don't know Nigeria literature, So I think we need each other create some ecosystem that know culture, my culture of your culture, with the literature and the films. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Abner. I'm a filmmaker. But today, I'm actually just trying to get to the bottom of this African.
Could you kindly stand, please?
Sorry. My name is
Thank you.
Abner. I'm a filmmaker. And when the Kenyan lady over there, she spoke, and she said that we should look to the ground and not in the sky. It was a good image because Hollywood is always in the clouds and all these fancy things, but sometimes you have to look right down. And then I also thought of something like this guy here. If you know Nigerian people and you know how they speak, maybe a lot of people wouldn't understand what he was saying. So it's so crazy. But in South Africa today, it's so hard to speak to people. Like, maybe I didn't understand what he said, but maybe you don't understand, but I can just tell you about what he said he doesn't understand. He's saying, why can someone in Angola not see something that's happening in Nigeria? And then I had a question for the Nigerian lady. So I've watched a Nigerian movie, but now I hear there's other cool Nigerian movies out there. Why didn't I watch them? I watched that lady that said, you know that young girl that says, I'm a business lady, I'm a hustler. So why would I watch that and not one of those groundbreaking films? Why would I watch that instead? Because I didn't know about those films. So that's the problem, it's the disconnect, and we sometimes not speaking the same language.
All right. So are we still holding the questions, yeah? Can we start with your anecdotes?
Sure. I think you answered your own question by doing it. You literally did the ritual. So you're a producer, right? You're the person to actually do it, right? So you're the captain of your ship. Last night I was at a dinner and I was sharing, I'm producing a short film and we want to shoot it in a country where gender rights are not the same as the rights of the director. And I'm like, how do I navigate? Like, this director's coming from a place where there's inclusivity, but we're going to shoot where there isn't. And how do I hold space for the crew and not impose a perspective, because that's the law of the land, but also make the director feel safe? I don't know how to do it. And then we were brainstorming, but it's my duty as a producer to solve that problem. So nobody's gonna tell you how to solve that problem, but you solve it, and we're in spaces like this and we share knowledge, and then we start to create systems and processes. And so you literally answered your own question. But my anecdote is, on the gig that I'm doing in a different country, the one where I'm the only Black person in a room, and we were telling an African story, and no one else on the crew but me and the writer were people of color. And she comes from a different spirituality than me. But she was like, we're telling a story about ancestors, and she brought these beads and a candle, and she's like, can we have a moment to just acknowledge and ask permission? And it's a fictional story, there's no one to ask permission, right? But I was just like, sure. You know, like, if it's her process, if it's for her, that's the process. So just holding space for your people, because actually I don't think we can reimagine Africa if we're not operating and holding space for the way we think and be. But also I think it's very important to not treat Africa as homogenous. So I think we should be curious about each other, because just being sensitive of, in my doing this, am I offending somebody else? And if we are, let's have a chat. Let's go, hey guy, you know what I mean? So we have to be constantly talking, because all of us here don't all feel the same thing about everything. But we have to actually get to know each other better, the diversity, and then that's how we can start to create systems that actually include many people and their diverse ways of working and thinking and being.
Absolutely, and I just want to add on to that. Excuse me. One of the things we always asking ourselves, how do we shift these narratives? But one of the very first things we developed was the ethical storytelling handbook that we then turned into a 4-hour online course that's free, and it basically tells you, it shows you how to write about Africa in 8 steps, just to encourage centering ethics in storytelling about the continent. And one of the 8 steps is acknowledging belief systems and acknowledging local context and acknowledging even your own bias and your own privilege, so that when you go and you tell those stories, you're not just walking in with yourself, your ideas and your expertise, but you've also sat down and said, hang on, in this community, for example, there are places where you have to seek an elder's permission to come and shoot in that space. It's not enough that you have a permit, you know. Someone must still come and give you permission. And to them, that permission expressed at a community level carries more weight than a paper that you might have from some ministry. So things like that are very important, because it's also part of just who Africans are, right? And those things matter. And you can't say to a person, your spirit is not going to be captured. You have to hold space for it. And if you want to tell your story better, make sure that you're able to do, if it's a ritual that's needed, then it's a ritual. But I also think that's the fun thing about working in Africa, right? And in our own terms, we can play with our ideas, we can center ourselves, we can manifest ourselves in every single way that we choose to.
So if I can just add to that, I think, you know, one of the things that you as a producer really become on a project is you become a steward. and you become like a custodian, and you're protecting, and the translator, those three things. Because you're really essentially taking something that was central to your process and explaining it to these people and helping them see it differently. But going down to their level and to where they are and not imposing. And I think it's the approach that all of us across like our different like areas of producing need to kind of continue to embody. It's something as simple as having your contract. So for example, one of the things I learned recently that I am going to imbibe is I'm going to have my contract in all the local languages now. So I will have it if I'm going somewhere, and Nigeria, we have, Jesus Christ, we have so many languages. You know, and if I'm, wherever I'm going to, I will have an English version, but I will have the local version as well. Because I want to go in there with the blessing of the community. And I also want to go in there knowing, not letting them be aware that I'm not against you, I'm with you, right? So how do I translate it in a way that makes you feel safe and gives you like an experience that you might not have otherwise had, but now, next time you want to do that, they will be open. Do you see what I mean? And next time someone else wants to do that, they will be open. And then they will go in turn and like tell their friends and tell their family. And you know what I'm saying? And also, I oftentimes do a thing where whenever I'm going somewhere to shoot, wherever I am going, I find out what it is that we can leave the community with that is better than we met it. It could be something as basic as just getting their schools like some gifts, something as simple as that. But I think that approach is a very friendly approach, and it shows like a communal feeling of like, oh, these people are with us, they are not against us. And I can't tell you how many times I have been saved just because someone somewhere recognized us on a shoot, realized we were shooting again, and came and protected us. It works all the time, so yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it was an embarrassing moment, so where I had to step off stage. I had an emergency to take care of, so I apologize for that. Hey, no problem. Thank you. We had
You want to answer the Kenyan
okay.
question?
There was a question for me at the back. Could you come again, kindly?
The question on this side or that one?
And as he does, he mentioned something about language and not being able to understand each other. But I think one of the things that we need to change in terms of how we do our narratives as Africans is not to perceive language as a barrier, because I don't think that barrier exists in music. So why do we then perceive it as a barrier in film? Yeah, so maybe as you come up with the question again, that's something we probably need to reflect on. Language, Africa, we're blessed enough to have so many languages, and that's the beauty of our narrative. So I'd encourage that we don't perceive language as a barrier, but as an opportunity to showcase culture.
Can I add my 2 cents on that? And I think we need to hear better. Because I think sometimes we're lazy, and we go, I don't understand what you're saying. And you're actually not, we're not trying, actually. And I think we need to watch each other's work frequently, because I think it's in repetition and familiarity. So, you know, accents are tough and tricky, sure, but it's your first exposure, but keep watching stuff. But we also have to keep making stuff, right? So that we've got more stuff, and then it just gets wired into our brain, and then we're just hearing a voice and not an accent or a nationality and whatever. So I think we just need to not be lazy and just try hard to listen.
But to his point, actually, you're from Angola, right? Yes. To his point about the consumption habits, I think curiosity starts from there. I think if I had to read something from Kenya, something from Angola, something from South Africa in school, the truth is my view of the continent is shifted. My understanding of the cultures is shifted. My curiosity is awakened. So I actually think I agree with you 100%. I think the integration of the continent needs to sort of begin in other ways, and education is a big aspect of that. Because there's absolutely no reason why I should not be learning something else from another country, being in Nigeria. You know what I mean? And I think when you think about how it then affects what people make, which was his point, because what you consume determines how you make, essentially, or how you create. I think what I would say to that is there's an important point that Tendayi made, which is, oftentimes with her reflection of like being inspired by Baz Luhrmann, it's the way and it's the how. It's not necessarily it's not the context, because your context would not. It's not a Hollywood context, right? It is this context. So it's it's really knowing that your own unique experience, because you are experiencing it, has validity in the world. Now, there is a way that stories can be refined and can be told better. So it's going through that learning of refinement and better storytelling, but it's not changing your context, because your context is valid, And I think the thing we have to sort of learn how to do and shape with kids and with like education is balancing that context with the refinement, and letting the kids know that, like, listen, like, you don't need to copy, because we do a lot of copying, Jesus Christ, like, it's just like, and we need to stop, and we can't keep doing that, but I think it's also a coping mechanism, because it's how you've learned how to make sense of your world. You know what I mean? And I think it's just knowing that there is refinement and there is better ways, and there's ways that we can learn from the world as a global place, but it never changes our context and our lived reality. Yeah.
So I have to balance 2 minutes remaining, and I know we had a question at the back, and someone needed to ask their question again. So if I may please take the person who had not asked the question and then come back to the one who needed to reframe the question. So if we can take that one question, please, and if it can be as brief and precise as possible and directed to a panel member. And then I'll also ask that the respondents kindly keep it brief as well.
Hi, my name is Zamom Kwanaze. I'm a writer, director, producer from South Africa. And my question is for Funmbi. Sorry, I can't actually see that far. So maybe I'm saying your name wrong. Forgive me. Funmbi, I just wanted to ask you a question about Mubi in particular. Because I think I had very high hopes when Mubi started out. It seemed to be quite a democratizing sort of platform. But when I last looked at them, there was literally not one single African film, not one. Is there any kind of shift that you are feeling internally? You spoke about a lady from Ghana. I'm not sure if that's Mubi or BBC.
Thank you. If we can, we're at the end of
Should the guy go and ask his other
unfortunately, we can't do that one.
Okay.
Yes, we'll take
so,
this question.
yes, it is shifting. Let's chat after this, because then I can probably go into a bit more detail. But yes, it is shifting. I think generally what we are finding across board institutionally is Hollywood is dry. So I think more and more it's become imminent on us that are creating our home to just continue to make stuff and being positioned to engage with these sort of institutions, because they're looking. So it is shifting, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And his question was, why haven't you watched it? There is a distribution problem. The last time I checked, it's hard for me to even watch things from South Africa. We need to solve that. That's why you haven't watched it. And yeah.
So, a word of thanks to the panelists, a word of thanks to you too, as well as the staff that are holding the space. Thank you.